Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Zichrona Livracha, in a 2002 interview shared the following. Dissents speak to a future age. It's not simply to say, my colleagues are wrong and I would do it this way. But the greatest dissents do become court opinions, and gradually over time their views become the dominant view. So that's the dissenters' hope, that they are writing not for today, but for tomorrow. Ruth Bader Ginsburg teaches us that even when our opinion, our words are not the majority, it does not mean that they are any less important. Our words matter. The Talmud, like the United States Supreme Court, records both majority and dissenting opinions. Great sages such as Hillel and Shammai may have opposing opinions, but we preserve the minority opinion so that we may learn from it in the future. That is rare in today's society. So too are leaders like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who value the importance of words. Kol Nidrei, all vows. Since last Yom Kippur, do you remember every promise, every vow that you made? Whether we remember it or have forgotten unintentionally, most likely we have not fulfilled every promise. First mentioned in the 9th century, Kol Nidrei, a prayer that is not a prayer, but rather a legal formulation, has gained popularity among the masses, but its very existence continues to cause controversy. While the tune used in the chanting of these Aramaic words invoke deep emotions of this day, have you ever given any thought to what it is being said? All vows, pledges, promises that we have made, we hereby retract. May they all be undone, repealed, and canceled. While these vows only refer to those that we made between ourselves and God, and not to promises that have been made to other people, some have argued that it gives a negative impression of the Jewish people, that our words have no meaning. Since its inception, rabbis have expressed opposition to the inclusion of Kol Nidrei, but ultimately this custom became a cornerstone and a highlight of the high holy days. Many rabbis were concerned about making a blanket statement to annul all vows. If we know that every year we're just going to cancel all of our promises from the past year on Erev Yom Kippur, then what's the point of making a promise in the first place? As I look back on this past year, there are many promises that I made that I was never able to fulfill. I'm reminded of this when I look back on my calendar and see meetings and events that never happened due to the pandemic. Instead of looking backwards, focusing on promises unfulfilled, the calendar hanging on the wall, frozen in time, untouched in a classroom or office, tonight, let us look forward. In the 12th century France, Rabbeinu Tam changed the language of Kol Nidrei from annulling vows made in the past year to speaking about the future, from this Yom Kippur to the next. Tonight, we already made this legal statement, but now I want to encourage us to think about the importance of our words in the upcoming year. We live in a world of misinformation. We are numb to the hypocritical promises of politicians, and we, as a country, lack unified trust in science and public health. My teacher, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Diamond, a Talmud professor at JTS, explains Kol Nidrei, which is, at least in its original formulation, a formula for Hatarat Nidarim, a ceremony for the annulment of vows. Before we begin to pray, we recite a formula reminding us that words have power. They both create and nullify obligations. Our prayers are not meaningless. Words count. But the symbolism of Kol Nidrei is double-edged. Unlike actions, verbal commitments can be undone. Our prayers do have power, but only if we mean them, only if we act upon them. Rabbi Diamond makes a powerful statement that prayers are not meaningless. Words count, but they only have power if we choose to act upon them. On Yom Kippur, we spend a lot of time in prayer. More than 20% of the sins we will confess in the Yeshamnu and the Al-Chet confessionals are sins that relate to the content or tone of our speech. Clearly, The words we say matter. So how can we make the most of this time in prayer? How do we make our words count? Soon on Simchat Torah, we will restart our reading of the Torah. In Parshat Breshit, the opening of the book of Genesis, we learn that God created the universe with words. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks writes, "Just as God made the natural universe with words, so we make or unmake the social universe with words, promises, verbal undertakings, and vows. If we honor our commitments, there is trust, cooperation, and graciousness in human relations. If we fail to do so, trust wanes, and the social fabric begins to unravel. So when we ask God to release us from promises we made to God on Kol Nidrei, that we now regret, we are signaling the intense seriousness with which we regard verbal undertakings." Both Rabbi Sacks and Rabbi Diamond reveal an important lesson from the words of Kol Nidrei. We need to take our words seriously. On Yom Kippur, if we are to engage in tefillah, in prayer, how can we make the words that we say in the prayer transformational and not just a beautiful melody to listen to? As a rabbinical student interning at a congregation, I remember at breakfast following morning Minion when one of the Minion regulars asked to talk to me and the rabbi privately. As we sat down in the rabbi's office, she said, "I am 91 years old. I come to Minion every day. I know the prayers, but I don't know the meaning. What can I do?" Perhaps her question sounds familiar. We turn the pages, we say the words, but do we really understand the words that we're saying? This congregant asked this question because she wanted to feel a connection with prayer, to approach prayer with seriousness, to make her words count. When the pandemic hit and closed the physical doors of Temple Sinai, we opened our doors online and we expanded our evening Minion to meet every weekday night on Zoom. In the first week, so many people logged in for evening Minion. Some were the Minion regulars who would have showed up regardless, and others were searching for meaning and decided to take part in Minion. Prayer can give us support. Being part of a Minion allows us to recite certain prayers that we are unable to say by ourselves. But I know for many, being part of a Minion is more than reciting the words in the Siddur. Being part of a Minion is about being part of community. So much of Judaism is about showing up. When there's a simcha or a joyous occasion, we share our joy by celebrating the occasion with the community. And when there's sorrow, we show our support by visiting a house of Shiva. COVID-19 has taken an important tool from our toolbox. It has prevented us from showing up, from giving a hug in times of joy and sorrow. But the tool that we still have in our toolbox is our words. Now more than ever, our words and our prayers have greater importance. Following evening Minion in our first week of Zooming, I received a message from a congregant saying, "Can we add a prayer for healing during Minion?" Upon seeing this message, I thought, well, what a great idea. But then I realized something. What this congregant was trying to show me is that our words matter. And since that night during services that we typically do not offer a Mishaberach Lecholim, a prayer for those who are in need of healing, we as a community have offered a communal prayer for healing at each Minion. Saying these words each day has not become a mundane task. Each time I recite the prayer for healing, I think about what I can do to help others. That might mean remembering to wear a mask each time I leave home to stop the spread, or calling a congregant or a friend to check in to make sure that they are supported and cared for. Some may say that prayers, especially prayers for healing, are worthless. More than 200,000 Americans have lost their lives to the coronavirus. Do prayers really make a difference? To this, I would say prayers are powerful. When hearing or saying these words, they can cause us to act. We remind ourselves that we can do our parts in helping to provide healing of both body and soul. From the first week of the pandemic, I began offering a virtual coffee gathering on Zoom. What started as a way to check in with one another soon developed into a class where we explored Jewish texts that spoke to the current moment. I soon became aware that when preparing for the weekly Tuesday gathering, I gravitated towards speaking about prayers and rituals. Why? Because unlike the majority of rabbinic literature, prayers and rituals are familiar. We already feel a connection, even if we do not understand the full meaning. In the days following the death of George Floyd, I struggled to find any words to share. That Shabbat, as I looked at the prayers in Siddur Lev Shalem, the same publisher as the Machzorim that we are using today, I took note of the prayer Oseh Shalom, that is at the end of the private meditation of the Amidah or the conclusion of the Kaddish, where 4 additional words are placed in brackets. If you open your Machzor to where we just left off on page 221, you will see these words in the brackets in the final line of the Hebrew. We are used to saying, Oseh Shalom b'mromav, may the one who brings peace to the universe, Hu ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, make peace over us, v'al Kol Yisrael, over all Israel, v'imru Amen. And let us say Amen. The phrase in brackets, v'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, means, and over all who dwell on earth. When we add these words in the brackets, we are praying for peace that is not just for us, and not just for all Israel, but for everyone. That following Tuesday, I shared these words within the bracket at Virtual Coffee with the Rabbi. We talked about changes that we have made in our liturgy as a congregation and the impact of these liturgical changes. While the words V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel are printed in our Machzor, they are printed within brackets because change takes time. But as RBG would remind us, the greatest dissents do become court opinions, and gradually over time their views become the dominant view. Including these words, even in brackets, mark a first step. Later that day, during evening Minion, several people felt moved to include these words when reciting this prayer. I invite you to think about these words. How can including these words in our prayers, praying for peace not just for us, but rather peace for everyone, cause a change in the world? A colleague, Rabbi Noah Arnau, explains, what might the effect be on us of praying for the peace of Israel and all who dwell on earth? Words that we say over and over and over and over and over somehow eventually penetrate our hearts, our thoughts, our unconscious, and our conscious. Imagine the way that stalactites are formed by dripping that happens over the course of an unbelievably long time. And in the way that erosion very slowly can destroy a mountain, we are slowly eroding one unhelpful idea and replacing it with another that I think feels truer, healthier. Like Rabbi Arnau, I know that change takes time. If you feel comfortable, I invite you to add these words to your prayers. And don't worry, on Yom Kippur, you'll have many opportunities to practice. On Yom Kippur, we spend a full day in prayer. But when we hear the final shofar blast and we put down our machzorim, may the prayers that we have said lead us to live out these words in the real world. That is the power of prayer, when prayer can cause a change. Ruth Bader Ginsburg spent her life fighting for equality for all people. From this Yom Kippur to the next, how can we work to ensure peace for all those who dwell on earth? Kol Nidrei is not about the promises we have made in the past. We are looking forward to the future. Let us work to create a better tomorrow. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, Hu ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, v'al Kol Yisrael, v'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, v'imru Amen. May the one who brings peace to the universe bring peace to us and to all the people Israel and to all who dwell on earth. And let us say, Amen. Gemar Chatima Tova.